Hi everyone, this is a quick lecture on how to start your introduction paragraph with a hook strategy. I'm going to be talking about 4 different hook strategies and providing you with examples. The first thing I want you to note in your notes is that your introduction paragraph total should be between 4 and 6 sentences. Now remember that your thesis statement is the last sentence of your introduction, so that is already 1 sentence. So your hook strategy should only be between 3 and 5 sentences in length, because 3 to 5 sentences plus a thesis means you're going to have a 4 to 6 sentence introduction. So I'm going to go through each of the strategies and I'm going to explain them and then give you an example. So the first strategy is beginning with a personal story or anecdote, and it's where you tell a story from your own life. And this is the only place that it's okay to use I or me in your informational essay. The rest of your essay should stay in third person, objective voice. You want to show a personal connection to the essay topic, and you can do that by sharing an experience, a lesson you learned, a book you read, a movie you saw, a family trip, a school story, anything that shows how you personally relate to the topic. Generally, it's a thematic connection, so the connection might be loose, but it should be obvious that why you're telling this story for the reader as a nice intro into this essay. So the example that I have is a student essay about the importance of George Washington. And so I'm just going to read for you the example. Please do not write this down. You don't need the examples written down, but I did want you to have the benefit of hearing them. So student writes, all we did was drive, and each time we stopped, it was to visit another site. That morning in Washington, D.C. was different. We stepped out of our hotel and walked 4 or 5 blocks. Suddenly, I was amazed by all that surrounded me. The Capitol building off in the distance, the White House to my left, a vast field of grasses and 2 ponds reflecting a towering white monument. What's that? I asked my dad, and he responded, that's the Washington Monument of George Washington. My mind started to wander. A monument, a city named in his honor? This must be someone who made a difference. As I began to learn more about his courage, his leadership, and his patriotism, I realized he had indeed accomplished much. So here we have a student. Not only are they telling a story, but it's important to note the narrative techniques that the student is using. So there's sensory details describing the colors, the shapes. It would be even better if the sensory details included smells and sounds and feelings. And then they even weave in this dialogue, and the dialogue is very powerful. So narrative techniques like sensory details, dialogue, these are all really great ideas to include in your personal story because you want it to be an engaging story. The second hook strategy we're going to talk about is beginning with 3 questions. And these 3 questions clearly have to be related to the topic, and probably the best way to approach the 3 question strategy is to begin with a very general question and follow it with 2 more specific questions, or vice versa. Begin with a really specific question and broaden the next 2 questions so that they're a little bit larger scope. You don't need to answer these questions, right? Because if you have 3 questions, that's 3 sentences followed by a thesis statement. So that's 4 sentences. That's long enough to be an introduction because your introduction is 4 to 6 sentences. So you don't need to answer the questions. Really, the purpose of the questions are to pique your reader's interest in the topic. And a lot of times by the time you get to the end of your essay, in your conclusion, you might be able to answer some of the questions or resolve some of the questions that haven't really been explained in your essay, but don't worry about that in the introduction. 3 strong questions. Make sure you use varied wording and vocabulary, and as much as you can, if you can ask them in third person instead of second person, that would be great. Because if you're asking them in second person, it's as though you're asking the reader a question, and sometimes that feels very informal. So an example of this would be, this is an essay written about how box stores, like those big superstores, stores like Walmart, are destroying family-owned businesses, smaller businesses that can't really compete price-wise. So it starts with this very big question. Is it true that bigger is always better? And then the questions get a little bit more narrowed in scope. Could it be that our insatiable desire for more is in many ways giving us less? Once we've accepted the premise that more choice is better, is it possible to reverse that trend, or have we set a course from which there is no turning back? Now, my only criticism from this, I love the questions. I think they're thought-provoking, they're interesting, but I wish in this third question, and well, actually the second and the third question, they were keeping that third person. So they could rewrite it and say, could it be that our insatiable desire for more is in many ways giving society less, people less, trying to keep it more objective? Sometimes personalizing the questions can be powerful, but it can also be kind of informal. The third strategy I want to talk about is beginning with a quote. And a quote could be a quote from a famous book, it could be a line of poetry, it could be a song lyric. And when I say beginning with a quote, if your quote is more than one sentence, now you don't want to use a really long quote because that will weigh down the beginning of your essay. You want to start with a shorter quote, maybe a sentence or two, but you want to count that all as one sentence. So it doesn't matter if it's one sentence or two within the quote, just count the quote as one sentence. So you begin a quote that's related to the topic, and then this is the key, and a lot of students struggle with this piece. You want to follow the quote with 2 to 3 sentences of explanation and analysis. So you don't just throw the quote up there and then jump into your essay or your thesis statement. You want to pull the quote apart. Look at the word choice. What is it saying? How does it connect with the theme that you're writing about or the topic that you're writing about? So you have your quote, you follow it with 2 to 3 sentences of explanation and analysis, and then you have your thesis statement. And that is a complete introduction because the quote is one sentence, then you have 2 or 3 sentences of analysis and your thesis. So that's going to put you somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 sentences, which is what you want. Please make sure you put your quote in quotation marks and that you include an author in parentheses. Okay, so an example of an essay that begins with a quote, and this is an essay focused on women in politics. It says, it's a quote by Hillary Rodham Clinton, and you'll see I put it in quotation marks. It says, "There cannot be a true democracy unless women's voices are heard." And then I put Hillary Rodham Clinton in parentheses. And it says, "A democracy is a system of government that places power in the hands of the people. If individuals are not granted equal access and representation, then that government cannot claim to be a true democracy. The lack of female voices in the United States government creates an imbalance of power based on gender. Despite the smaller percentage of women currently involved in high-level government positions, pioneers like Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi, and Condoleezza Rice are leading the way towards gender equality in politics." So, again, we have our quote, we have the explanation of the quote, and then we have the thesis, where clearly this essay is going to be focusing on these 3 women. The fourth and final strategy, and this one is so great when it's done well, but it can be challenging to do. It really depends on the essay topic and whether or not you have access to a computer where you can look up an interesting fact. So this is the unusual or bizarre fact strategy. So you begin your essay, the first line, with an unusual fact. And if you have a topic and you're interested in trying to find an interesting kind of unconventional fact about it, just Google it and see if you can find some, Google the subject and then plus statistics or facts. And then try to find something interesting related to your topic. And just like the quote strategy, you want to follow the unusual fact with 2 to 3 sentences of explanation and analysis. So it needs to be clear why you are sharing this fact with your reader and how it relates to your topic. So fact must clearly relate. Analysis must tie to the topic, so your analysis needs to be strong. Again, you're explaining why this is important, how does it connect, and then you need to place your fact in quotes because you're probably grabbing this just like you would a quote from online. So you need to show that you're taking it word from an online resource, and you need to cite your source in parentheses. If you're not sure how to cite an online resource, go to our class website, and I have hyperlinked on the links page a link to the OWL Purdue site. And it is a fantastic site, and you can look up MLA citation guidelines for electronic resources. So the example here is a great one, and I don't know if this fact, it's been a while, but I'm not sure if this fact is accurate, and I apologize for not citing it properly or putting it in quotations, but this is a sample from a student paper, and so they clearly found this quote somewhere. They did not cite it properly, but it's such a great example, I want to use it anyway. So ideally, this would start with a quote that is sharing this fact, whatever this fact is the student has found, and then they would have a citation. So they begin their paper, and this is an essay on choosing a career and what goes into choosing a career. They say Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, could spend $1 million per day, every day, 7 days a week, and would not run out of money until he was 311 years old. Most would agree that he has reached a point of financial security. In fact, it would be almost impossible how to figure out how one could spend $1 million per day. For most Americans, finding an occupation that is satisfying, earning enough money to live comfortably, and figuring out a realistic blend between work and leisure are three essential factors in beginning one's career. So here we have a really interesting, eye-grabbing quote. We have a nice explanation of the quote and how it relates, and then a great transition into the thesis statement. So remember, all in all, your introduction is 4 to 6 sentences in length. 3 to 5 sentences is your hook strategy, and the last sentence is your thesis. Do not combine hook strategies. You only want to choose one per paper.